Hello, hello. Welcome to Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes. I am so excited for today's guest because, October is Mental Health Awareness Month. And throughout the year, we've been hearing mental health awareness being not only the hot topic, but still being considered as a stigma within our society. And I thought, what an important way to not only celebrate this month, talk about our challenges, but really talk about what resources are available to us as well. And Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes obviously is about money and learning about our finances, but we tend to forget that our monies are actually connected with everything around us. So it could be our physical and our spiritual and definitely our mental health that affects our finances. So I wanted to bring in someone who I've gotten to know in the past couple of years now, and amazing to see her do these incredible events, some pop-up workshops. She's also been attending and spoke at a few conferences, major conferences, and being able to have her today and talk about not only her journey with mental health, but really why she started her businesses and how she's helping other people. So for lack of better words, I'm inspired by what she's doing. She's obviously touched my heart because it's dear to me as well when it comes to mental health. But thank you so much, Brandie Carlos, for being here with us. Tell us, before we dive into it, maybe your story a little bit, why you decided to start this business.
So Therapy for Latinx started last year in February 2018 after I lost one of my best friends to suicide.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it was really hard. He was someone I knew since I was 16, and so I really struggled with, survivor's guilt and what could I have done differently. And so I was looking...
Can you describe what survivor's guilt is?
Yeah, so survivor's guilt is when someone passes from suicide or something, kind of tragic, and you survive. So you're living without them. And so I had thought of, could I have called more? Could I have checked in with him? And so there were all of these thoughts that I had. And I knew that this time I needed help. Like, I wasn't going to be able to just get through it on my own. And when I was looking for a therapist, I had a really hard time because I knew I wanted a Latina. Mm-hmm. I was clear on that, but it was like either they were too expensive, like some of them were a car payment.
Wow.
Like, where sessions are between $150 to $200 a session.
And is that with insurance or without?
That's without.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's like out of pocket, and it's a lot. So I was trying to find the right fit, and I couldn't. And so in my search, I did come across Therapy for Black Girls, which was the first person of color directory for mental health. And I was so inspired. I was like, oh, this is so incredible. I'm sure if there's one for the Black community, there has to be one for Latinas. Mm-hmm. But to my surprise, there wasn't. So I kind of took it as a sign. I looked if the URL was available, therapyforlatinx.com. And when it was, I kind of felt like it was just a sign that I had to create the website. And I didn't know one therapist at the time. So I didn't know how it was going to come together. I just knew that it was something I felt really called to create.
Right. And obviously your purpose tends to drive you to that direction. And first, it's such a sad and difficult, traumatic moments that you're going through, right? But you obviously chose to take some action, not only to help yourself, but to help other people that are probably going through the same process. Yeah. And I totally understand when it comes to going online, looking for therapists, especially if you're moving to new locations, you have to go through that whole process again. And even I've been with and without insurance as well. So I've gone through both sides too, where I'm like, God, it's so expensive. Even with insurance, let's just be honest. And so being able to make it more accessible, and I can understand, like you say, you sometimes look for someone that understands your background, so it's preferred when you can. I mean, for me too, when they ask, do you want a female doctor, I'm like, yes, that'd be great. Yeah. So I completely understand creating such a space for people to feel safe, especially when you're going through something so vulnerable as you were. And obviously still dealing with it too, because I think a lot of people just I still say it all the time, where I'm like, my grandfather just died almost a little over a year ago, my grandmother too. And people kind of like, okay, when are you going to snap out of it? I'm like, hold on. It's not something that you just snap out of. It takes time. It takes a lot of mental health as well. So thank you for doing that, because, I mean, you weren't probably the only one that was thinking it, but you were smart enough to take action. And yeah, when the URL happens, I feel like it's always the universe saying this is time. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. It takes baby steps. And for people that listen to this podcast, a lot of them do have their side businesses or their call them side hustles now. And it usually comes from a problem that they wanted to solve.
Yeah.
And hearing your story, when I first met you two, actually I heard about you through mutual friends. I thought this was brilliant because sometimes when we think about starting a business, it has to be like some kind of product or something physical. But sometimes it's just, it could be an app, it can be something online that is literally a glossary for people to find out what is a therapist, what is it that that's in your area, and a network really. And so you're creating that space. And when I heard you speak at We All Grow during the keynote conference, I loved you touched base a little bit on the imposter syndrome. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because I think for October, not just because it's mental health awareness, we see a lot of women feeling overworked, overwhelmed, overburnt, you could say, because it's the end of the year, and that means we have a lot more responsibilities financially, right?
Yeah.
The holidays are around, where maybe kids are back in school, we're trying to get ready for property taxes, all these things that tends to fall on the women a lot. And so the imposter syndrome is very real. It's something I still very much struggle with. And I know there's things that I'm like, first of all, I didn't know that existed. And how do you cope with it? But how have you learned to, maybe even tell about why you've dealt with imposter syndrome and how you've learned to cope with that?
So for me, something I had shared, and I had never publicly shared, was that I dropped out of high school. And it was really circumstantial. Like, my caretakers were my grandmother, my grandfather, and my Nina. My Nina got really sick in Mexico. She happened to be on a trip over there and ended up being hospitalized for 2 years.
Wow.
So my family couldn't come back and forth. And so really, it was my senior year, and I had just turned 18. I got like a part-time job at Starbucks. So I was working there on weekends, but in that period, my grandma didn't have money to fly back and forth, and her sister was in a coma. So my brother and I ended up surviving because I would take home the leftovers at Starbucks at night. And that's how we like got through, and eventually I had to drop out. The lights got turned off, and you know, so there were all of these circumstances that had me make that decision. But I've always loved learning and business. Like, my first business was Pokemon and like Mexican candy.
Oh, I love that.
In elementary school.
That's awesome.
So it's just always been something that has been so natural to me. But going through that was really hard. I was really ashamed of like not finishing school for a long time, and then I got my GED and I started different businesses, and then that's when I realized like I love learning. I'm smart. I don't necessarily need a piece of paper to validate that. And everyone has different paths, right? Like, I think if school's for you, that's great.
Right.
But if it's not, like, that's okay too.
And you're continually educating yourself too.
Yeah.
I mean, you invest a lot in that too.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people think if you just go to the formal institution, that's it, and it's not. It's always continuous. And obviously we've talked about some financial books, you know, earlier we were talking about David Bach, we're talking about, you know, Smart Women Finish Rich and Couples Finish Rich, and the fact that you've already exposed yourself to a lot of this literature. I mean, I learned something earlier about like affiliate marketing that I didn't know, and you know, it's kind of because I think it comes out of the survival mode, and I think sometimes I appreciate more entrepreneurs that come from that background too, not necessarily just the fancy titles you can say, but because of that reason, because I feel you just said it, when you were dealing with these things at 18, when most 18-year-olds weren't even thinking about or would have never even thought about, you learn how to not only budget, save, learn how to, you know, make $1 work a lot longer. And I think that's the misconception a lot of people when they're dealing with their finances or learning about money. They keep saying, when I get a bookkeeper or when I get a CPA, they're going to be the one managing my money. And it's like, wait. If you can't manage that $1 right now, you're not going to be able to manage more money in the future. And so for you, because out of sacrifice and out of survival, you started doing that early on, and obviously it's helped you where you are today, having your own business, thinking about other investment opportunities that you're already taking. I think that's really brilliant. The fact that you are a woman, young, and Latina, I think when it comes to representation, I'm a big firm believer of that. And you're talking about also topics that most people don't want to talk about, you know? And I heard you on that stage, and I'm like, I love that. I mean, there was moments where you're saying something, and I know a lot of us were crying because we tend to make it sound like it's so easy. It's not. But it's also part of that we're strong and that we kind of get past it. For you, can you think of maybe, if it's not books or other podcasts or maybe some resources that have helped you maybe tackle down a little bit like the challenge of not knowing about money, but something that we're like, oh, this is actually really helpful for me?